Wanted to give a bit of an overview of what HAVEN does to give context for why we've chosen to partner with Ecosense on this fun journey. HAVEN specializes in IAQ controls in the residential space, and our vision is to proactively care for and address the ongoing comfort, health, and safety of our indoor environments. So basically, our hardware gets installed alongside the central HVAC system of the home by HVAC professionals and has sensor and controls components. We'll be following up with another webinar to talk about the more technical bits and installation and everything, but on a high level, it's good to know that our controller has two 24-volt dry contact relays, and so this allows it to be able to control most kinds of HVAC and IAQ equipment like your air handler blower fan, ventilation equipment like ERVs, HRVs, and also dehumidifiers and humidifiers. So we use sensor inputs from our induct and room monitors in order to track the particle, chemical, and humidity levels in the home. This data gets processed and then fed into our logic algorithms, based on which calls are made to the solution equipment that is connected to the controllers. So this is basically how we're able to create this on-demand management of the air in a home. Let's see if I can figure out next slide. Okay, so historically we have specialized in the induct monitoring, which means we have a more averaged image of what's going on in the home. This is great in when we need to understand if we generally need more circulation, filtration, ventilation, or humidity control, but it also means that levels throughout the home need to get to a certain point before action is taken. With radon, however, we understand that the detection and action should be much faster based on very hyperlocal readings, typically monitored in the basement or lower levels of the home. Over the years, we've been asked time and time again by our HVAC pros and building science experts if HAVEN can monitor radon. And so we've worked a lot with these kind of professionals that are looking to integrate it into their strategy for improving the home's HVAC system and air quality. Basically, this got us thinking about the concept of being able to plug in radon readings in order to control mechanical ventilation equipment like ERVs and HRVs, but instead of it being a continuous control, we would have it be on demand. So it is unlike a radon mitigation solution that would require this constant ventilation extraction, rather it be responsive. So depending on the exact implementation, we see this being a little bit more affordable and less energy intensive to run. So this is, so basically we have recently launched our own room monitor to collect local readings in the home, but we knew that it would be a huge undertaking to develop our own radon monitor. And instead of going down the years-long rabbit hole of creating our own, we decided to build it with outside help, and that's where Ecosense comes in. So you guys really became a front runner to partner with, as our company has really clicked on a couple different fronts. You were able to produce some of the most respected and reputable solutions for radon detection, number one. They had also just participated in an extensive third-party study where they ended up coming out on top. They also shared our understanding of having long-term monitoring benefits. So we don't just want to, we've long stood for not just spot testing air quality, but having that permanently installed monitor to gather data over time, really give us the whole picture of what's going on throughout the year, let alone like the time of day things can change based on temperature, humidity, and a bunch of other factors. So I think lastly, it's also worthwhile to say that both of our companies had in-house development teams that could move quickly. We really wanted to get this implemented on a short time frame so that we could start putting together a solution for our building science professionals. So that's just a little bit about why we chose to work with Ecosense, and I'll hand it off to Dallas for continuing.
Thanks, Lucy. Let me get my slides up here. Can you see those?
Yep.
Okay. So I had an opportunity to look through a list of attendees and saw we have a cross section of homeowners and some HVAC contractors and some radon testers and mitigators, and so it looks like we have a lot of people that come from a little different background. And so I'll go over some information just to begin with that may be known by some of you folks. So bear with me. There are some people on the webinar with us that perhaps don't know that radon is a group A carcinogen. And what that means is that it has been demonstrated to cause cancer, in this case, lung cancer, in people, not just lab mice or based on some studies on other animals. This is all based on human data. And the US EPA estimates 21,000 Americans die of radon-induced lung cancer every year. And so it's often referred to as the leading cause of lung cancer in non-smokers. Certainly it's second behind cigarette smoking, but it is ahead of everything else that's related to getting lung cancer. The estimates are 12 to 13% of US lung cancer deaths are linked to radon exposure, and it's the alpha particles that the radon gas emits that are, and the radon decay products and that cause the lung cancer. The decay products are tiny particulates of heavy metals, and they too are radioactive, and a couple of these emit alpha particles, which are the most powerful of the radiation types. Alphas don't travel as far as gammas, but whatever they hit, they do a lot of damage to. So what happens is we breathe the gas, and the gas quickly decays into these very short-lived radon decay products. And there are two poloniums that are created very quickly, and they stick to the bronchial epithelium or the lung tissue itself, and release those alpha particles directly on the cells, so they don't even have to travel in order to cause this damage. So that's the process. The risk estimates are based on extensive exposure studies of home occupants, as well as underground miners and lab studies. And these studies have been done all over the world, Europe, Asia, the United States. It's extensively studied. In fact, it's probably the most studied environmental carcinogen. But the good news is that if you know you have a concern or a problem, then elevated indoor radon can be affordably reduced by a qualified mitigation contractor. Now, there are some recommended action levels that are a little different depending on who's making the recommendation. If you look at the US EPA, in the United States, we measure radon in picocuries per liter, and Americans like to be different from everybody else in the world. The rest of the world measures radon in becquerels per cubic meter. So the EPA action level equates to about 148 becquerels per cubic meter. In Canada, they are at 200 becquerels per cubic meter. If you convert that over to picocuries per liter, it's about 5.4. So you can see there's a little difference there. The World Health Organization actually recommends that we take action at 2.7, which is 100 becquerels per cubic meter. And in all of these recommended action levels, The scientists and epidemiologists are not saying that radon below these action levels is safe. These levels were set because first of all they're achievable by mitigation technology, and they're also levels, particularly when you start getting down to 2.7. If you get much lower than that, then the accuracy of a lot of the radon detection devices that are out there used by people may not be able to measure as well at those very low concentrations. So anything you can do to lower the radon concentrations in places you spend time is a health benefit. On the left of this slide, you can see that comparing to cigarette smoking, which some people like that comparison, others don't, but even at 4 picocuries per liter, or roughly 148 to 150 becquerels per cubic meter, if you're exposed to that on a regular basis, that's the equivalent of about 200 chest x-rays per year or 8 cigarettes per day. Particularly when you start thinking about your family and your children, this is a health risk we want to pay attention to. A lot of people look at maps, and one of the most used maps in the United States, at least, is the EPA map of radon zones, which was developed way back in 1992. And unfortunately, at the time, they didn't have a lot of test data to base that on. So they did the best job they could, and looking back, they did a reasonably good job. But nevertheless, there are counties that are classified in one of the zone 2s or zone 3s that people tend to think, well, if I live in one of those orange or yellow counties instead of one of the red counties, then I don't need to be worried about radon. But elevated radon has been found in every state in the US and every province in Canada. It's not limited to particular types of houses. Elevated radon can be found in houses that are old or new houses. They can be found in houses with crawl space foundations, slab on grade foundations, basement houses, houses that are drafty, houses that have been made energy efficient with insulation and air sealing. You just don't know unless you test. So testing is the only way you can determine. And the best way to test, as you'll see as we go through this, is with continuous monitoring, which up until recently was just not affordable for homeowners. But now technology has allowed us to create a very, very sensitive, efficient radon sensor that's affordable. So if you compare the annual deaths associated with radon exposure, you can see that while it falls behind, say, motor vehicle accidents, it's certainly ahead of drunk driving and smoke inhalation from wildfire exposure or carbon monoxide poisoning. So it's a legitimate health concern we need to take seriously. If you've ever had the experience of being with someone who's suffering from lung cancer, it's ugly. It's something we want to avoid. And the good news is we can test for radon and monitor our radon, and at least we have the opportunity there to reduce our exposure where we can prevent radon-induced lung cancer. Mitigation is achievable through a number of different methods. Improving ventilation is certainly a place to start, and that's where HAVEN comes in. If you get into severely high levels, then it will take more than just ventilation. But the other thing to remember is so many of our houses are not properly ventilated. And so if we can take action there and then correlate how that's contributing to whether our radon concentrations are reduced as a result of additional ventilation by continuously monitoring. This can be an affordable solution in many, many instances. Um, so the idea, as Lucy mentioned, is we're integrating the radon monitoring into their total IAQ package and air handling system, and it gives you the ability to really see what's going on in your home. Just to be clear, radon is, as I mentioned, is everywhere. There's some trace levels of radon outdoors. The good news there is it dilutes into the greater atmosphere and really isn't a concern at outdoors in most cases. But radon concentrations are constantly fluctuating, particularly indoor concentrations. And so poor ventilation can certainly trap radon indoors. The radon entry can be affected by whether we're using exhaust fans, whether we have the air handler on or the air handler off, particularly depending on the type of air handler we have, whether we have strong weather conditions at a particular time. Just seasonally, it can vary from winter to summer, whether we have some windows open during mild days or whether we have windows closed and it's cold and there's a big temperature difference between inside and out. All of this plays a role in the radon concentrations moving up and down throughout the course of a day and week and throughout the year. So EcoQube is a real-time continuous monitor, which means it takes a reading of the radon concentration every hour, and then it starts again for the next hour and has the ability to then average those hourly readings over the course of a day, a week, a month, and a year. So you can really see what's going on inside your home. It'll track those seasonal variations and weather factors and gives you the ability to look at it over different time periods. A good example is this right here. This was actually from a school, but I've seen this kind of trend in homes as well, where you can see that the radon concentration goes up every night and comes down every day. Now, this isn't necessarily the case in your home, but depending on certain factors, it could be, for example, in a school when the kids leave and the teachers leave in the afternoon, the air handler shuts off and the radon concentrations start to build up because there's no ventilation going on in the building, and it can go up to be quite high. And then in the morning, they turn on the air handler and the ventilation system, and the radon concentrations come down. But being able to look at this can help determine whether we should turn the air handler on earlier in the morning on Monday morning than we do on Tuesday morning, because we've had a whole weekend for the radon to build up with no ventilation, or whether we need to start it even earlier if it's been a longer holiday period. And perhaps by knowing this kind of information, we can mitigate with the ventilation strategy. Well, this works in your home too. I had a conversation with a woman in Utah this fall. It got cool enough where she was turning on her heat in the evening. And she sent me her data from her EcoQube, and I shared her EcoQube data with me, and I looked at it and I said, wow, for the last several weeks, every night her radon concentration was going up to about 7 to 8 picocuries per liter, and every day it was going down to about 2 picocuries per liter. Over the course of those several weeks, her radon average was about 3.9. She says, well, so I'm under that 4 picocurie per liter action level that the US EPA sets, but I am at home sleeping at night when it's up at 7 and 8, and I'm away at work during the day when it's down at 2. What do you think? I said, well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I wouldn't be very happy if every time I come home and go to bed at night, I'm breathing, 8 picocuries per liter, even though the average is less than 4. So having the ability to look at the hourly data and make some comparisons to the kinds of operation in the building is very valuable to taking action. The other reason that I think HAVEN went with Ecosense to partner with, it can be seen in this particular chart. If you look at the orange graph, this is an EcoQube, and this was a house that has a mitigation system in it. You can see over on the left side, while the mitigation system was running, the radon concentration was around 2 picocuries per liter. And just to demonstrate how well this can monitor, we shut the fan off, and for the mitigation system, which was a soil depressurization, and you can see that the radon concentrations rose up to close to 14. At that point, perhaps during the day, they opened some windows. It was you can see this was in October, and this was in Georgia, so it can be warm, but maybe a little cooler in the night. It can be warm during the day. Then it came back up again. You could see turned the system back on, and you can see how quickly it monitored the radon falling. But this blue line is a competitor's device. So most of the devices you will see on the internet that are home electronic devices are not true continuous monitors. What they do, instead of giving you an individual hourly reading where it can react very well to the changing radon concentrations, their sensor just isn't sensitive enough to be able to give you a 1 hour reading with any certainty. So what they do is they collect some radioactive counts during that current hour, but they have to add those to the counts collected for the previous 23 hours in order to have statistics that they can report with any certainty. So they're in essence just updating the 24-hour average every hour. So it's much slower to respond. It's much going up, and it's much slower to respond going down. As Lucy mentioned, if you're looking at being able to take some action right away, you need a sensor that can respond quickly and let you know when the fan needs to be turned on, the ventilation needs to be turned on, whatever action you need to take. You don't have time for this to go on for some time before the sensor can actually go, oh, I guess the radon's going up. These are some graphs comparing 3-day averages to 1-month averages to a year. This was in a Pennsylvania home, and everybody who has looked up radon at all knows, wow, Pennsylvania has lots of radon, and this is true. But you can see, depending on when you test, you may not see it. If you look on the yearly data, there's a period over here in September, October, November, where the radon concentrations, for whatever reason, maybe the weather was mild, I don't know, but the concentrations are quite low. And then as you look over in January, the concentrations are high. You could test for a month, and depending on when you test, if you cut that down to shorter periods, you may or may not determine, really what's going on. So it's just so much more effective to be able to see the hourly data. This is an Ohio house. Again, you can see over the course of the year, this is the orange line here on the bottom is the 4 picocurie per liter action level we have in the US. And you can see it was well below that for March through May and July. But as you get into the fall, you can see how there's a lot of radon periods where it's above that action level. And then California, there's been a myth for a long time because of that EPA radon map that was done back in 1992 that there's no radon in California. Well, we've started to do more testing in California, and guess what? We're finding radon. So you can see here's a house that has periods where the concentrations are above. Yeah, I don't really have the average on this one as to whether it was actually below the action level over the course of the year. But having the data where you can limit your exposure those times that it's high is good for your health. So in summary, what I really want to stress here is that being able to track the radon concentrations with a very sensitive sensor and follow it over time gives you the ability to take action quickly and implement a strategy, working with HAVEN in this case, where you can keep the concentrations as low as achievable through their system. Last thing I'll just end with is we're proud of the technology we have at Ecosense. The reason I am a part of the company is because this sensor has impressed me since I first had the opportunity to look at the data that it can collect, and I wanted to be a part of the company. It's amazing that we can get this kind of detector efficiency at such a low, affordable price. I'll give you an example. When we say that the sensor is 15 times more sensitive than the industry standard, a lot of professional devices out there cannot come close to getting the type of accuracy in hourly readings that our monitor can provide for homeowners like you. So we've won awards as a result of the technology. We won the CES Innovation Award in 2021 and the Time 100 Best Inventions Award that same year. We've had a lot of studies done by independent parties like Kansas State University, the University of Michigan, had some other studies done. If you go to our website, ecosense.io, you can find a lot of them there, and about how well it performs. The Canadian National Radon Proficiency Program has been studying our homeowner devices for, I think, close to 5 years now. Consistently, every year they're running them in a radon chamber there in Canada, and they see that they track right along with the radon chamber monitor, and they don't change from one year to the next as far as drifting out of calibration or anything like that. So we're very proud of the studies they've done. So I'll end, Lucy, by saying we're honored to work with HAVEN to provide this to the public and HAVEN users, and to work with your technicians to get this implemented for as many people as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, Dallas. Those charts are so powerful. Every time I see them, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. That's why we need that whole year. Yeah, like we were saying, throughout the day it changes. And then if you're just doing a sample test before, like as a sales tool to get some kind of mitigation in, or to give the homeowner reassurance that they don't have a problem, it can be really problematic because people walk away thinking that they're okay. Maybe it came out as like a 2.7 or something, right on the cusp of the WHO level there. And then later they come back and they actually start doing that long-term monitoring and realize, oh my God, it's going up to 10, 11, 12 at nighttime. So yeah, it's really, really valuable. I will just finish off a few points here. So Yeah, Dallas touched on this, but we believe that getting the monitors integrated in our system is just the first step. What that does, it allows homeowners who are already using Haven potentially to add Radon and have it pull into the Haven app. Obviously, the Ecosense app is still visible and accessible, but what kind of sets us apart is the professional insight into the data as well, because Haven has a pro portal for our service companies. They're able to log in remotely and view the data to make sure that if they've put in monitors as like a cursory, like proactive tool to see what's going on in the home before they come back, they can do so through the pro portal. So yeah, basically we're trying to empower professionals to have more to go back to the homeowner with, and through the Haven system they can share these home air reports with their customers to provide that evidence that in fact something needs to be done here. So we're feeding in the Ecosense data in as an input, and in this case the output is that home air report. But that wasn't our end goal. Our end goal was the ability to add the data into our controls logic so that we can now activate ventilation equipment on demand when we see levels cross a certain threshold via motorized dampers or ERVs, all these different types of mechanical ventilation. So I just have a few screenshots here that illustrate sort of what it looks like in the install workflow when the pro adds the EcoQube into the automations setup. Then they're able to negotiate, okay, I'm also setting this up with a mechanical ventilation fan. They plug in all of the specs for that. And then what Haven does is it pops out a default template for that automation rule based on the most sensitive settings. We went with the WHO criteria because we believe that the sooner the better. If we're catering our system for very sensitive people, for folks who are worried about their health, so we wanted to have that be the standard rule, and then they can enter a custom threshold if they want to. So what we're trying to do here is create this lovely loop of being able to detect what's going on in the home, adding in radon to our already detecting PM 2.5, TVOC, CO2, NOx, and the humidity factors as well, and then being able to activate the right equipment at the right time to resolve issues. So obviously, as Dallas mentioned, the radon mitigation system using, I shouldn't say mitigation, I should say using ERVs or other mechanical ventilation to treat the symptoms of radon won't work everywhere. It can be helpful in conjunction with mitigation solutions, or we see an opportunity potentially if there is already ventilation equipment installed in the home. Let's see what we can do with that first before we get the next stage of solutions installed. We've seen this work in some homes with higher radon, and by activating the ERV, we were able to get those levels down to about half of what they were. In the situations that I'm thinking of, we were around 8 to 11 picocuries per liter. So we were able to cut that down to about 4, which would meet that EPA guideline, so not quite even our own standards. So what we want to do and what we're starting this spring are a couple of case studies with Ecosense and some third-party folks, among whom are our top building science professionals. We want to figure out what are all of the factors where this would be successful or would probably be successful to help folks down that path. Um, yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Oh, one method that we see being quite successful so far is on some ERVs, you can tune the intake motor so that uh, basically bringing in more outdoor air than what we're pushing out. And that's in order to pressurize the house positively and push out or assist in pushing out any radon levels that might be coming up from the ground. So, this is one method that we're going to be illustrating in our case study, and we're really excited to see what the effects are. Um, if we have any homeowners or pros in the crowd here who are interested in getting in touch, take a screenshot here. Uh, just as far as like sales go as well, on the pro side, we do go direct to pro and through distribution. So homeowners would need to be in touch with a pro. You can also get in touch with us and we'll pair you with a qualified vetted pro in your area. That is it for now.
Thanks, Lucy. I think this is a great opportunity. There's so many houses, even that when a mitigation contractor installs a soil depressurization, that perhaps they didn't really look at the ventilation rate or lack of ventilation in the home. And as we've made houses tighter over the last couple of decades, in particular, the oftentimes the mechanical ventilation that we really need to have in order to meet the current ASHRAE standard, for example, is just overlooked. The people aren't paying attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
If you know, the states now on most of the time in the U.S. and I'm relatively sure that's true in Canada. If you build a brand new house, then mechanical ventilation is now being required, but that's fairly recent. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's so many houses out there that don't have enough ventilation. So the ERV or HRV is a needed appliance for houses that don't have enough ventilation in many instances, or the air cyclers that can control when air is brought in through the return plenum, and it will cycle on certain times, like the one you demonstrated, when it needs to have air, not just to control the radon, but for everything else, to make sure we have good quality air. And then if you can adjust it, if your pro can adjust it to where it can add just a little positive pressure, then now you're helping to to prevent that radon entry from the soil, because the pressure is now a little bit higher indoors than it is in the soil below.
Mm-hmm.
So good things can happen by paying attention to what that ventilation rate is. So
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Building science always is always a bit of a mind bender. It doesn't, sometimes it's not even about having the best equipment, but what does your ductwork look like? What is your building envelope? What are like, are you in a field next to, sorry, are you next to a field where they're doing a bunch of spraying, and like all of these factors are impacting our indoor environment. So it's important to look at everything holistically, and sometimes that means bringing in a couple different types of professionals to help out.
do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Anybody want to type something into the chat or raise your hand and we can open your mic?
Mm-hmm.
No, everybody's bashful today. We must have done a good job, huh? Oh, Don Ingram raised his hand. Let's see if I can. Okay, Don, I opened or asked you to unmute. Can you?
Okay.
Yeah,
Can you
we
hear
can
me?
hear you.
Hear me, Dallas? Okay. Um, I have a client that has many apartment complexes, and they've installed some low-end makeup air fans on hundreds of apartment units. And the problem they're experiencing is that inexpensive makeup air fan is injecting outside air into the mixing box of the plenum to each unit of these apartments. And what's happening now is that it's got a very low end filter on it,
Mhm.
so it's bringing in basically outdoor contaminants, a lot of pollen, a lot of cedar during certain times of the year, and they're having a proliferation of mold growth in the mixing boxes and plenums, as well as elevated humidity that they can't control. And it's been a nightmare. They've essentially unplugged hundreds of
Oh
these little
no.
boxes because of this, it's creating this contamination in all these apartment units. Um, do these ERVs, I don't have much experience with ERVs or HRVs. Do they have good HEPA level filtration capabilities if you install those?
Some of them do, but the most of the ERVs that I've seen come with fairly low grade filters, like a MERV 8. Um, what? Yeah. What about you, Dallas? Are you familiar with
Yeah,
any?
I've seen some that are starting to come with a little better filter. And you have to be careful about where you install, just, pulling air into the to return plenum, even if you've got a cycler, a timer on it. Certain climates, it may not be the best idea. Um, and I'm familiar with what you're talking about, Don, because uh, in an ERV, the good news is that it's actually changing humidity from one airstream to the other. So if you're bringing in humid air, then that humidity gets moved over into the outgoing airstream to take it out. So in humid climates, that's a much better way to go. And then you get into other climates. If you're then perhaps an HRV would be more effective. So um,
Yeah, even ERVs, like it'll sort of average out the indoor versus outdoor temperature and humidity. So you won't be able to extract all of the humidity from the outdoor air if that's your single solution. Definitely, as Eric's saying in the comments here, a ventilating dehumidifier can be really great in those kind of climates because it's actually dehumidifying the air before the return into the air handler. So we can mitigate a lot of that kind of issue. And there are a couple of really great pieces of equipment like Santa Fe, the ventilating dehumidifiers that they make. I know for a fact they come with MERV 13 filters. So we're getting on the intake side a great amount of filtration as well as dehumidification. Now, I do want to also say, in these kind of climates where sometimes the air is safe to bring in from outside and sometimes it's not, our Haven system can also help put limits in place that essentially get attached to each automation rule. Let's say we want to open up, bring in fresh air via an outdoor damper or mechanical ventilation of some sort. We can attach only bring in that air if the outdoor AQI levels are within a certain range. So that can help your situation with the pollen, or maybe there's wildfires in other parts of the continent. Maybe you want to restrict it to only bring in outdoor air when it's between like 30 and 60 RH outside, or maybe even use the dew point, even better. We even have temperature cutoffs. So if your system can't handle whatever is outside, we can help protect that by putting these limits in place, which might have a better effect on the indoor environment than just turning off that makeup air fully.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is in Texas, so it's not like we're in Louisiana or Georgia. So we don't have that. The humidity is not really that high. It's just that these folks are running their units full blast in Texas, trying to get 95-degree temperature down to 68.
Yeah. Won't quite work with that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing that up. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Don.
There is a
Anybody
question
else?
from Steve in the Q&A. I think you want to read it.
Picked EcoQube versus RD200 because preferred Wi-Fi over Bluetooth. Is that why we chose EcoQube for Haven integration? For sure. The fact that we can connect, so EcoQube is connected on its own. It then pulls up, houses all of that data in its cloud. So then when we created the API, we can just pull from the database instead of directly from the device. So it's all Wi-Fi connected. And the beauty of like how we're kind of rolling out the next iterations of our system is that if people like to have that Wi-Fi connectivity, then that's great. But if they want the system to run on a closed loop, we're working towards that as well. So we're trying to look at both options. But Wi-Fi was definitely a big factor there.
There is a question from Steve. It's in not in chat, but in Q&A. About a customer in Florida who lives in a third floor condo and still has high radon. So they're wondering if that's possible. And the customer has 2 monitors from Ecosense.
Thanks for bringing that up. So Steve, I was just in Florida at a conference where I was talking to professional testers there. There's an area in Florida that runs sort of around the Ocala area in both directions or in all directions, where they mine gypsum phosphate. And once they either remove the phosphate for fertilizer or the gypsum for gypsum board, but whatever's left over, all that is very rich in radium. And once they mine it and then pull out whatever they're trying to get, the leftover slag is very concentrated and in that radium, and radium produces radon. And over the years, because of lack of oversight and regulations, a lot of that leftover slag, whatever you want to call it, that gets piled up in the fields around these mines, gets utilized in different ways. And one of the ways it gets utilized is it gets mixed into concrete. And so we have seen quite a number of condominiums where on the upper floors, the concentration is elevated because the concrete is emanating the radon. It's not being drawn in from the soil. So yeah, a ventilation idea in this ventilation in this situation is really good for those types of situations, because usually the concentration is only elevated just somewhat. Yeah, so that's interesting you brought that up.
Yeah, it's wild how much in our homes actually off gases, and the fact that concrete buildings built years and years ago can still be emanating or off gassing, that kind of thing. Cool. Any other questions before we sign off here?
There was a question prior to the webinar asking where we can buy EcoQube.
Yeah, I just threw the link into the chat there. Feel free to follow it. EcoQube on ecosense.io. There's a shop now. It's also available on Amazon, I believe.
Yeah, if you go to ecosense.io, then yeah, you can find them there, and that's probably where you'll get your best deal. So yeah, just remember it's not .com, it's .io, ecosense.io.
Great.
Anything else? Did we get them all, Ksenia?
I believe so.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Well, Lucy, it's a pleasure. I enjoyed this. Learned some things myself. So thanks all of you for joining us. And if you have questions, by all means, as Lucy said, contact Haven. You can contact us, and we'll get the messages to where they need to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Dallas. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.